Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Wavelength.
The real issue with data privacy is who's collecting your data behind the scenes, so in the back end of it, and who is that being shared with.
Sparking the combos about Adelaide.
It's every woman's choice. If they choose to have an abortion, then so be it.
You should be having...
These issues need to be properly investigated, and we need to make sure that LGBTIQ people are supported to be who they are.
On Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength, sparking the convoys about Adelaide you should be having. I'm your host, David, and tonight I am joined by Jamie. How are you doing, my love?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
How was your weekend?
It was absolutely lovely, except when I walked into this studio tonight, somebody else was in here before and let a ripper fart.
All right, let me just say, this room is really small. So, if someone's trying to get away with ripping a fart and then leaving, we will know it's you.
And it was
it's so bad.
I'm not going to name and shame, but, oh, man.
We had to crack the Glen 20 out, and it just still has not done what I wanted it to do.
The person who did it, you know who you are. You know you were in the studio before.
Done. How was yesterday, though? The weather was amazing.
Just absolutely brilliant.
36 degrees and sunny. It is just, summer is here. It's beach weather.
Thank God.
Thong weather. Life
on.
is good. Life is good. Bring on summer.
Bring it on.
Anyway, tonight I'm asking why there are so few female leaders in SA Parliament. New South Wales has one, Queensland has one. So where's our female premier?
We'll also be letting you know everything you need to know about the coronavirus, but next we're letting you know about Rapid Enterprise Development, an organisation that helps people living with disabilities to engage in the world of business and enterprise.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. So this week, Hamish had a chat with Dr Guy Turnbull, a spokesperson from Rapid Enterprise Development.
RED is an organisation that helps support people living with disabilities to engage in the world of business and enterprise.
Wavelength. On Fresh 92.7.
Starting your own business can be pretty intimidating, but it can also be incredibly liberating. And for those living with disability, it can be even more than that. It can create confidence, freedom, and independence for those who need it most. Guy Turnbull, the CEO of Rapid Enterprise Development, or RED for short, understands this better than anyone, having lived with cerebral palsy and seeing firsthand how entrepreneurship can change lives. Guy called into the studio to chat with me about how RED seeks to make enterprise accessible to everyone living with disability.
Tell us a bit about yourself, Guy. What's your backstory? Who are you and what are you about?
I would kind of describe myself as an accidental entrepreneur. I never thought I would be running a multi-million-dollar enterprise. My doctorate is in geography. I kind of got lost along the way. I got blown away by the idea of democratic business and how business can transform people's lives. That, in one sense, is where RED came from. What everybody struggles with, whether you have a disability or not, is, we all want happiness. And it's all about somewhere to live, someone to love, and something to do. And for some people with a disability, it's that something to do we struggle with. Having a job gives you some kind of self-esteem, confidence, money to live your life, something to do. But if you can have fun doing something, then you'll never work again in your life. I'm really lucky. I haven't worked since 1994.
How does it all work? Could you tell us a little bit about the business model of RED? How do you go about, achieving what you guys do?
It's a step-by-step journey. We assign them an enterprise coach. We'll help them round out their plan. So test the numbers, test the market research, identify suppliers, and really kind of do more than just passive advice. Really engaging with the circle of support and the individual to develop the idea. all courtesy of the National Disability Insurance Agency. So you can use your NDIS plan, so rather than engage a support worker to take you to the cinema or get involved in community activities, why not use your plan to get a support worker to help you run your micro enterprise? And the great thing about enterprise is it's all about people.
Yeah.
And you meet some amazing people.
What is it that inspires you the most about the work that you do with RED? How has RED impacted the lives of those living with disability? And what are some of the great success stories or testimonials that you could tell us about?
Like a parent, I can't have favourites, but Patrick in the UK, who was set up as a handy person and gardener. Patrick chose this idea because he's got autism, but his passion is gardening and plants. But it's his character. And actually what his product was, the people he gardened for just loved his company. What's really interesting about Patrick is his parents moved up to Scotland a couple of years later, and he developed exactly the same business again, but without our help. So it's matching some of his character and traits with their skill, with their passion, with a market need. The trick is to try and find that alignment, because every business has to face the market, has to sell things to customers, but that needs to be aligned with their passion. So one of our clients makes handmade soap, and he describes himself, Charlie, as the soap baron. He started out making soap for dogs. Now he serves soap to humans as well. And the tagline he came up with was soap for dogs tested on humans, which has been hilarious. This is one of the drivers of being in business. Every day is different. And so I don't know what the next great story will be, but I know there will be one.
Society's perception of disability in a lot of cases is probably the most disabling thing about living with disability. Just from your unique perspective, I just wanted to ask whether you agree with that. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions that we have?
Disability isn't just about physical impairment. It's about loss of control. And it's about self-esteem and confidence and poor body image. And how you think about yourself. And I never see myself as having a disability. You know, when I was younger, people would stare at me, and I thought it was because I was good looking. What I do know is if you do run your own enterprise, you do stand 2 feet taller. Because you're proud about what you do.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That was Hamish chatting with Dr Guy Turnbull about Rapid Enterprise Development, an amazing organisation that Dr Turnbull is part of, a man who himself has cerebral palsy.
It's an incredible initiative that he's doing and creating the space for people with disabilities to be able to thrive and be successful just like we do. It's amazing that he's doing something like that. Oh, hats off to him. Yeah,
fantastic organisation. And you can find out more about RED at redbiz.com.au. Anyway, coming up after the break, Jamie, you'll be diving into our main story for the evening about the lack of female leaders in SA politics.
Woohoo!
You're listening to Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength with David and Jamie this evening, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. So, Jamie, tonight you've put together this big feature story for us. Tell us a bit about it.
I'd love to. So, SA has a pretty incredible political history in terms of gender equality.
Yeah.
SA was the first Australian state to pass the female's right to vote in 1984, as well as the female's right to stand in Parliament. But in 2020, SA Parliament has the worst female representation in all of Australia. We're the only state that doesn't have a female premier. So, I wanted to know why we're going backwards.
Yeah, very interesting topic. Anyway, first you spoke with Daniel Marx, the Senior Analyst for the Electoral Commission.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
South Australia has been a state of many firsts and were the catalyst for the women's suffrage movement. SA was the first Australian state to cast the women's right to vote, as well as the women's right to stand in Parliament, which passed in 1984. This bill passing then created a domino effect, and soon after, the rest of Australia followed. But fast forward to 2020, and South Australian politics seem to be going backwards. So why the hell have we regressed? And what is it needed to create an equal playing field for men and women in South Australian politics? We have Daniel Marx here with us today. Can you please introduce yourself and what it is that you do?
Hi Jamie, my name is Daniel Marx. I'm the Senior Research Officer at the Electoral Commission of South Australia, and I'm a political scientist interested in pretty much everything that goes on in the world of elections. Electoral Commission of South Australia, we run both the state elections and the council elections here, and so my work essentially looks at problems and analyses different problems that we find relating to those two types of elections.
The Electoral Commission recently released a report outlining that SA Parliament has the worst female MP representation in Australia. What statistics did you find in your studies?
So this was a really interesting subject to investigate. What I did in preparing this paper was go back to the mid-80s and look at data from all around Australia showing, for example, the number of women elected to parliaments, the number of women elected to leadership positions, and the proportion of candidates at elections who have been female. I guess the most striking statistic I found in my research is that women, who make up more than 51% of voters in South Australia, are just 29% of MPs in our state parliament.
Where does gender parity in South Australia sit compared to the rest of Australia and the world?
So the comparisons with the rest of Australia's parliaments are not very positive for South Australia. Overall, we have the lowest proportion of female members in the country. We have around 8% less female MPs than the national average, and only about half the share of female MPs that Tasmania has. Now, compared to the rest of the world, the statistics are actually really interesting. Although South Australia isn't a country, if we compare our parliament to national parliaments around the world, we'd currently rank 73rd in the world, sandwiched between Algeria and Turkmenistan. By contrast, Australia currently occupies 49th place in the world, the UK is 38th, New Zealand is 20th, while in first place is Rwanda, which has 61% of seats in its parliament occupied by women.
What's the ratio of men running and get elected versus that of women?
That question really gets to, the heart of the problem, if you like. So you might assume that as more and more women run for office, more are going to get elected, as if this was some sort of, natural process. But in fact, running for office is not the same as winning. What my research has shown is that the increase in the number of female candidates over the past 35 years has barely changed the rate at which female candidates get elected. If we jump forward in time to the last 6 years, so that's the 2014 state election, 2018 state election, 1 out of every 4 male candidates won a seat in Parliament, whereas for female candidates, the success rate was just 1 in 7. So according to the United Nations, and they've put a lot of work into analysing this, there's a minimum threshold which countries need to pass in order for women to make a proper impact on political decision-making in parliaments. And that threshold, or as they call it, critical mass, is 30% representation in the lower house of parliament. But what I can tell you, though, is it's not for lack of women trying to make it into parliament. In South Australia, we've got a long way to go. By my calculations, at the current rate, if everything continues the same, it's likely to take another 30 years for gender parity to be reached in our state parliament. So we're looking at about the year 2050.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Jamie speaking with Daniel Marx, the Senior Analyst for the Electoral Commission. And Jamie, first of all, great interview, but also some really, concerning statistics.
Lots and lots of really disturbing statistics there. For a state that's literally 51% of the state are female, and so for the fact that we're only represented 29% in Parliament is just seems quite ridiculous, just some of that we're ranked 73rd in the entire world also just is super low. So it's like, how do we... we've seen these shocking numbers, and how do we go so backwards from being such a progressive state once upon a time?
That's it.
Yeah.
We used to be considered one of the most progressive in the country, and now it's going to take, if we stay on this same sort of course, 30 years to reach gender parity in Parliament. so 2050.
Which is just, it's a long way away. It's a long way away. And potentially that could change and be shorter, but it also could go the opposite way. You know, it's not good enough. And we need accurate representation or more equal representation today. You know, we can't wait 30 years.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
We have the right to be, we have the right to be represented equally. We are in a democracy.
Yeah.
And so we're being denied that right as females.
Absolutely. Well, coming up later in the show, we're going to continue with your story, Jamie, but coming up after the break, Hamish will be letting you know about what's been happening in politics this week. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength. We'll be getting back into our story on women in SA politics soon, but now let's throw to Hamish to let us know what the hell is going on in politics this week.
What the hell is going on in politics at the moment? Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
And we're back. This week, ScoMo managed to make international headlines despite another certain someone continuing to hog the spotlight after he interrupted a female minister who was being asked what it was like to be a woman in politics. The topic in question revolved around the infamous bonk ban, preventing ministers from having sexual relations with their staff, which resurfaced in the news after a Four Corners investigation aired over the week, alleging inappropriate conduct by two government ministers. Meanwhile, the PM also warned the public to prepare for the contents of a controversial report into alleged war crimes committed by Australian soldiers in Afghanistan as an independent inquiry gets underway. A special investigator was appointed on Thursday who will examine the evidence behind the claims of misconduct, but the admission by the PM that Aussies would find the report difficult and disturbing foreshadows a damning verdict. Also in the news, Kevin Rudd's petition into Australian media diversity has picked up incredible steam since it launched last month, attracting more than 500,000 signatures and is now receiving its own inquiry that will scrutinise the News Corp monopoly. Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young secured the investigation, winning support from her fellow peers in Parliament. And now K-Rudd himself, along with a second former PM, Dr Turnbull, will be called to present their evidence. Finally, Scott Morrison also became the latest world leader to congratulate Joe Biden on his presidential win, and Premier Gladys Berejiklian has called for a slight tweak to the national anthem's lyrics. And that's what the hell's been happening in politics this week.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that, Hamish.
Stay tuned for the rest of my feature coming up after the break. But right now, though, you're listening to Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength. Before the break, we heard from Daniel Marx from the Electoral Commission.
But I wanted to speak with some actual women in SA politics to find out what the situation on the ground really is. So I spoke with Connie Bonaros, a member of the SA Legislative Council, and Irene Pnevmatikos, an SA politician from the Labor Party.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
If you could introduce yourself and your role in SA politics.
My name is Irene Pnevmatikos. I was elected in the 2018 election for the Legislative Council for Labor.
Connie Bonaros also elected at the 2018 election, not for Labor, for SA Best.
What was your experience getting into politics like as a woman?
I would say Parliament is very tribal. It's very much reliant upon tradition, very much reliant upon how things are done and how they've been done for a very long time, which was aimed for me. And so that's the sort of structure you enter. And certainly with women coming in, you're getting changes, but it's still a structure that was created by men for men.
Certainly learn to appreciate that this is very much institutionally, it's very much a boys' club very quickly.
Why do you think that we have gone backwards as a state in terms of gender parity?
There's no question that we are lagging behind. We're lagging behind not only in terms of representation, but also in terms of services and programs here. There seems to be extreme resistance to change in this state in terms of our institutions. Yet, in terms of the public here, the community, our society here, we're no different to any other state. It might be because we don't have a sufficient number of different people with different values and different ideas that come to the table.
We talk about gender parity and we talk about gender equality, But that doesn't translate when we see the candidates that are nominated. That's why I say sometimes it's like we've done nothing but pay lip service to, the principles we say that we espouse. So there's all of a sudden there's more women in here who are willing to speak their minds and to stand for what they believe in.
Do you think that it's up to the two major parties to take more responsibility for gender representation?
It's up to all parties. There's no question about that. Now, the difference is here in this state that the smaller parties, the minor parties, do have equal representation. So they have a 50-50 scenario. There is a responsibility on the major parties to actually do the same. We also need to promote women in a more conscious and strategic way as well, not women in marginal seats, in safe seats as well. It's not enough just to have women represented unless the people that are coming in bring with them values, beliefs, ideas that promote gender equality, that seek to redress the imbalance and seek to change things. You must have a vision of change as one of the criteria for becoming a member. We need people, men and women, who value gender equality, who want to end the discrimination or work towards ending the discrimination, and who want to achieve meaningful change.
I think we need a societal change. I think it's interesting when you go to your voters and ask your voters if they had a choice who they would vote for. So we do need to start, I think, with the public sector. Our goals in terms of the public sector should be goals that ensure gender parity.
Over 50% of the population in this state are women. They have a right to be represented. They have a right to have a voice. Democratically, women are being denied the right to participate and the right to a voice. And I suppose the other thing that needs to change is the culture a bit. All we see in terms of Parliament is squabbling and conflict and division. That's okay. There's a role in that because we have differing views. Let's focus on the other aspects of the work that we do here, which is working collaboratively, trying to achieve a consensus and an agreement in terms of going forward, bringing in a diversity of people who have different experiences, different life and work experiences. You make a better Parliament.
What advice can you give young females wanting a career in SA politics?
They should be active in their community. It's the best learning ground for preparation in politics, and are an agent for change. It is an important forum to work through. It's not the only one.
If you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. Because all of us can make a difference in one way or another.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Jamie chatting with two women from SA Politics about how it really is for women in politics in South Australia.
Oh, that was an honour. That interview was absolutely incredible. I went to Parliament House to interview Connie and Irene, and they were just two of the most powerhouse women I've ever met. It's really, really inspiring to hear what they have to say, and in terms of enforcing change by bringing in new people with new ideas. And it's more about diversity and bringing people in with other experiences. And, made the really important point to say it's men and women making this change. It's not all up to women. Men need to do it as well, and we need to work together.
Yeah, and what I thought was really interesting was when they talked about it's not enough just for gender parity. We need these people to come in with those ideas about gender equality as well.
Exactly.
So just putting a woman up who maybe doesn't even care about bringing other women with her is probably not enough. There's so much work to be done. And I mean, hopefully we can reach gender parity before 2050. I would love to see that.
Let's do this, guys. We got this.
Let's bring it down to at least 10 years.
Absolutely. Let's knock it down a couple of notches.
Yeah, come on. We can do this. I mean, fantastic story there, Jamie. Just such an important conversation to be having. Anyway, next, Wavelength explains everything you need to know about what's happened with the coronavirus this week. But right now, you're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
Right now, we're getting into our weekly segment where Wavelength explains what has happened with the coronavirus this week.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
As you already know, today hasn't been a good day. A new cluster of COVID-19 cases has unfortunately emerged in SA, all of which are a result of community transmission, leading to our worst outbreak since the pandemic began. But look, we're here to help. So strap yourself in. I'm going to break it all down for you, and we're going to get through this together. Also, just want to take the opportunity to say, stay calm. Despite how it seems, now is not the time to panic. Our state has been incredibly effective at controlling and containing the virus up to this point, so let's have some faith and confidence in the exhaustive efforts of our health authorities, health workers and contact tracers. So, here's what you need to know. As of this moment, Adelaide has 18 new cases of coronavirus. So, where did they come from? It's believed a large family unit is at the centre of the outbreak, with 15 of the cases connected. The current assumption from Professor Nicholas Spurrier is that a CBD Medi hotel is the likely source where the cluster originated. Should you get tested? Short answer, yes. Simple. There's never a good reason not to get tested, and that's more apparent now than ever. If you're showing even the slightest of symptoms, play it safe, go get tested, keep yourself and those around you safe, and let's get back on track as quickly as possible. SA Health have advised that anyone who attended the Parafield Plaza supermarket between 10:30 and 11:30am on Thursday, November the 12th, and the Lyle McEwen Emergency Department between 5:30pm Friday, November the 13th, and 4am Saturday, November the 14th, to immediately place themselves into self-quarantine. In addition to this, SA Health have also published a number of locations they believe to be places of concern. And if you've attended any of these locations in the last week, you don't need to quarantine, but you do need to monitor for any symptoms at all. And the slightest sniffle means it's time to get tested. It's the best and easiest thing you can do to keep Adelaide safe. Those locations are the Salisbury Bus Interchange, the Internode Adelaide Bus Stop on Grenfell Street, Elizabeth Shopping Centre, Hollywood Plaza, the Aquadome, Port Adelaide Hungry Jacks, Mantra on Frome, Fruit Barn Fruit Shop in Salisbury, Ecom Indian Groceries in Enfield Plaza, and the Mint Leaf Lounge in Mawson Lakes. Check the Fresh website for a full breakdown of the dates and times that are considered at risk for those locations. Will there be any new restrictions? Unfortunately, due to the worrying potential of this cluster, a raft of new restrictions have been advised by Premier Stephen Marshall today and will come into effect as of midnight tonight, remaining in place for at least 2 weeks. Those restrictions include a ban on all gyms, recreational centres and play cafes. Community sports and training have also been suspended. Weddings are now capped at 150 people. Churches, pubs, clubs and restaurants have all been capped at 100 people, while funerals and public gatherings at licensed venues have been capped at 50 people. All venues must abide by a 1 per 4 square metre rule, and there's no more standing up drinking. And only 10 people are allowed within your private residence, and that includes the members of your immediate family already living there. Mr. Marshall also recommended that you work from home if possible, stay home if you're vulnerable, and refrain from any unnecessary travel, making sure to wear a mask wherever social distancing can't be upheld, like on public transport. Can you still travel? Short answer again, not really, and I wouldn't recommend it even if you can. The other states have understandably been pretty swift in declaring South Australia as a coronavirus hotspot, and as a result have implemented strict screening measures for all new arrivals. All travellers into Western Australia, the Northern Territory, Queensland and Tasmania will need to undergo quarantine for 14 days, and all new arrivals into Victoria will be interviewed and possibly rapid tested. New South Wales, however, is keeping its borders open to South Australia for now. That's pretty much everything we know about what's going on right now. But as you know, things can change very quickly, so stay informed and keep up to date by tuning into Fresh News every morning between 7 and 9 and every afternoon between 4 and 6. And right here on Wavelength for our weekly update on Mondays between 6 and 7, along with checking all our socials. And we'll do our best to bring you the latest breaking news and stories. Just remember, wash your hands, get tested and stay safe, Adelaide.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that, Hamish. Letting you know everything you need to know about the coronavirus this week. You're listening to Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the conversations about Adelaide you should be having.
Right now, we've got a weekly segment called Heaps Good News, and this week, Arj's got the goods for us.
I know there's gonna be
Heaps Good News on Wavelength.
It's that time of the show where we try and find some heaps good news to brighten up your week. Last Friday, Adelaide had their annual Christmas pageant. People and families headed down to the Adelaide Oval dressed up to the nines to see some of the most awesome floats and acts on offer. The crowd significantly less than the usual 300,000. However, the event is a timely reminder that despite how bad things have been this year, South Australia and Australia has come out well ahead compared to many others in the wake of this pandemic. 3 yachtsmen who were stuck at sea for 5 days after their mast snapped finally reached dry land. The 3 men were reunited with their families on Saturday at 10:30 after New South Wales Police towed their boat into Nelson Bay, Port Stephens. Adelaide Council has been quick to step in to protect Adelaide's pigeon, installing a large planter behind it to prevent skaters and scooterers from using it as a ramp. A number of videos have already emerged on social media of various pranks taking place, including a scooterer doing a backflip off it and one Adelaidean attaching a large sex toy to it. Love or hate the pigeon, it's a classic Radelaide move. And some wholesome news from across the pond, 6-year-old James Thomas has raised £10,000 for charity after dressing up as Captain Sir Tom Moore for World History Day and walking 100 laps in his backyard. For those who can't quite remember, in the wake of the pandemic, Captain Sir Tom Moore raised over £30 million for the NHS by walking laps in his backyard in the lead up to his 100th birthday. The WW2 veteran was eventually knighted for his efforts and was one of the Queen's first in-person official engagements since their first lockdown ended. What started off as James's school project has seen him raise over £10,000 to help feed children in schools and homeless people.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that, Aj. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thank you for listening, Adelaide, and thank you for joining me in the studio, Jamie.
Oh, thank you. This was an absolute pleasure, as always.
As always.
I love looking at your face and hearing your voice.
Oh, thank you. Face for radio.
Oh, make sure you've subscribed to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and you'll be the first to know when tonight's episode goes up. Bye, guys.
Wavelength.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.